Characters. Who are they? What are they? Who will they become? So much goes into the creation of a character, their backstory, culture, beliefs, image, eye color, description, personalities, and so much more. As readers, we only get a glimpse of what truly goes into each character. So grab a beverage and get comfortable as we explore this episode's character in depth with your host, Madilynn Dale. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another fantastic episode of Character Driven. I have a fantastic author and friend on today, and we are going to be talking about his book series that I actually haven't got to dive into. So I'm really excited to pick his brain on this character. But enough of me, let me bring him in and let him introduce himself and tell us a little bit about what he does and who his character is.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I've been really looking forward to chatting with you, as always. I'm David Green. I write epic fantasy and urban fantasy, which I get the pointing right. And this one is the epic fantasy side, and this one is my urban fantasy side. And this is the guy that I'm here to talk about today, which is Nick Holleran from the Helen Haven series. It's called. There is one book kind of out at the moment. I think that's the only way to kind of say it. It's because it's two stories in one as a special edition. It's called The Devil Walks in Blood, which is this one. So it has two stories in that one. But then this year there's going to be quite a lot of his books coming out. I've got this one here, which is called One Life Left, which is his next full story, which is already written. It's probably going to be out towards the end of the year. And then there's going to be a sequel to that. And there's probably going to be a prequel as well. So lots of Nick to come.
Sweet. So let's start out with, where did the inspiration come from to create Nick's character?
So I really like film noir stuff, right? So like I studied film at university, and so I like film quite a lot, but I really like film noir, and but I don't read any of it, which, thrillers and stuff like that. But the first book that I ever wrote, which I think is out this year as well, is a 1940s set detective thriller set in Santa Monica, and obviously my main thing is fantasy. So I'd written the first book of the Empire of Ruin series, and epic fantasy is fun, but it's kind of heavy and it takes up a certain amount of brain and everything like that. And I just wanted to kind of do, before I jumped into the next one, which was going to be a bigger book and it was going to be like more complex and everything, I wanted to just do something a little bit more like not fun, but a little bit more something different as like a palate cleanser for myself. So I was like thinking, well, I like fantasy and I like film noir stuff, and I have this other book that I'd written. I was like, I wonder if I could just merge the two of them together. And obviously that is like not like some revelation that no one's ever done before. Like it's quite there's quite a lot of examples of it. And I was aware of the Dresden Files. I hadn't read them at this point. So I knew that like Harry Dresden was in that kind of vein, but he was a very kind of magical, he was a wizard. So I was like, well, I'll do this and just do it as a regular person. Like, what could I do? What can I bring into it? So that's where the idea came from. And I just did like a little novelette, really, which was called Dead Man Walking. Mm-hmm. And then I wrote the sequel quite quickly afterwards, which was The Devil Walks in Blood, which was a bigger one. And then we decided with the publisher just to kind of, we released them separately at one point, but then we just put them both together as a special edition, because just to kind of give people better value for them. So that's where it came from. I just wanted to kind of see like, a regular person put in, that's like kind of like takes a lot of the kind of tropes from like film noir kind of stuff, but then kind of updates them all and kind of like pokes a bit of not fun at them, but kind of like looks at like kind of really kind of male chauvinistic kind of stuff and kind of like and do away with that, because I know, because when I went back then after I finished the first two, I went back and I started reading the Dresden books, and I was like, yeah, I can see like there's some similarities here, but Harry Dresden's a lot more misogynistic than Nick Holleran is, right? And even though like I do like the Dresden books, so yeah, so that was what it was. I just wanted to kind of merge the two things that I'd already written, and I really do enjoy, after I've done some other writing, I do enjoy going back to Nick, because he's just I write it in first person present as well, so it's nice just to kind of just do that kind of completely different style to what I do in my epic fantasy books, which are third person.
Yeah, that I have noticed that there is like a different way of thinking between like the way like third person and first person, the way your brain puts it all up there. I actually find it a little bit easier personally to write in first person, especially with bigger fantasy stories.
Right.
For some though, they don't agree with that, but that's okay. Like everybody's got their own way, Let's talk about how Nick gets his abilities. He's got kind of a backstory, and you told me a little bit about it in the document I had you fill out. But let's share that with our viewers.
Yeah, because it's not a spoiler, so that's fine. Because this is literally the first sentence in the book, is that he dies in the first bit of the book, right? So he's talking about how he was killed. So he is. So he's bounced around a bit. He's got a bit of a kind of mysterious kind of past, but he's ended up in a place called. So this is a real world setting, but it's a city of my own creation. So he's from Portland in Oregon, and he lives in a place called Haven, which is close to Portland, and he is a private investigator. But he kind of does a lot of work for the mob, like a lot of kind of like tailing people, taking photos, and kind of like seeing all this kind of stuff and what have you, just for paychecks basically. And he knows that it's wrong, but he's just that's the way his life has turned out. So on a case, he's following someone, and the guy knows, and he shoots him. He shoots, leaves him for dead in some alleyway, as he is dying, so he's the guy. He's an atheist as well. He doesn't believe in anything. And as he's dying, his spirit comes out of his body and starts going up to heaven. And he's like, "Well, I guess I was wrong about pretty much everything in my life then." Right? And then he's going on his way up there, and then someone comes and like kind of help, like keeps the blood in his body and calls paramedics, and he goes to the hospital and he's resuscitated, and he's. After a bit of surgery and whatever and all this kind of stuff, he's recovered, and as the day he leaves hospital, with his kind of mind completely changed, that he knows that there's like an afterlife and there's a heaven. He realizes that there's a hell as well, but hell is earth. We are all living in hell. And as he's kind of walking out, he's seen all these kind of ghosts that are hanging around. Some of them are stuck in loops. Some of them are like living their own lives. There are like demons. There's Nephilim. There's Wendigo, there is vampire, there's anything you can think of. At one point he says that as well, so he's saying to someone else, like if it's been written about or you've seen it in a movie, it exists except for werewolves.
Wow.
Just because I thought it'd be funny just to have that one last thing. It's like just no werewolves. So he's in hell, and he's like, and so he's a normal person still. He has no magical powers. He can just see this, and people that are like him, that have had like these near-death experiences or actual death experiences, and they come back, can see it as well. So there's kind of like this like little like kind of underground of truthers basically that know all this. But he starts to he is like, well, now I know heaven is real. I want to go there. I don't want to be staying like all these people in hell. So he tries to keep his nose clean, and he's taking jobs for ghosts and demons and other things like that. And he also wants to try, because he's a curious kind of person. He wants to figure out why this is the way it is. Why Earth is hell, and did he do something to deserve this, or what? So he's got a few things that's going on there where he wants to do.
Oh, okay. You definitely have got my interest about like why the world is hell. But I mean, like, obviously, we've got to read the series to figure that out. So
Right.
you're sure, like, you snagged the book. That's crazy. So, how did you go about creating the world after his near death stuff? He's seeing all these things. Like, what is his epiphany like when he realizes, like, holy crap, this stuff has been here this whole time?
Yeah, so we don't really get to see that happen. What I did was, because what I wanted to do, because it is written in first person and everything, I didn't want to have this whole like origin story where you have to go through all this kind of like and because it would be a lot, because it's quite a packed place, right? So what I did was, you have this bit where like it's like a prologue of the book where he's kind of talking about what happened, and then it skips forward 5 years. So he's been living for 5 years and in this world, but it also gives me a chance to go back and do prequels, which I have written a prequel. But so yeah, we skip forward 5 years. So he's been kind of like doing the job for 5 years, and he kind of thinks he's got everything figured out. But he hasn't, obviously, because there would be no story otherwise. But he's just been kind of basically doing the same thing he was doing before, but for ghosts and demons. Like, he's just doing like really kind of low level jobs, just existing. He's taken his life from earth into hell, right? So he's just doing the same thing. So the first kind of part of Devil Walks in Blood, the special edition, so the Dead Man Walking, is his epiphany moment where he's like, there's something else going on here, and there's something, there's more going on that I need to kind of figure out. And that's what the first book, this Devil Walks in Blood special edition, is all about. So which I thought was kind of interesting, just to kind of do that kind of, because I think a lot of people would react that way, that like once they get over the initial shock, they'd just be like, because he's kind of like, I'm still working a job because I've still got bills to pay. You know, it's hell, but I still have bills to pay and I still have this to do. And it's like, he even says it at some point, it's like, well, you get used to anything eventually, right? So
that is crazy. Do you have a favorite scene that you've written him in?
Yeah, but it's in this book that isn't out yet. This one is pretty wild. Like it's because it is urban fantasy, and like the first book, there is some fantastical elements in it, but the next one that's coming out is one where the kind of the doors are blown off the barn a little bit in terms of like the scope of the world and everything. So there's some pretty. There was one bit when I was writing it where I was kind of like, have I gone too far with this, with what I've got planned for this bit? And I was really, really interested to see what my beta readers thought of it. They all seemed to really enjoy it, which was good. But I was like, I think I may have gone too far, but obviously I didn't, so I have to go further. But in terms of like, in The Devil Walks in Blood, there's a bit where there's a subplot about animals going missing. There's lots of wanted posters or missing posters for animals that are posted around the place, and there is a scene where Nick keeps being chased by a few different things, and there's a bit where it all kind of comes to a head, and these spirits have possessed these animals that have gone missing, and he gets attacked by them, and they take the form of little Jack Russell dogs. And they're all attacking him, and like, Jack Russell dogs are about this big, and I just thought it was just like ridiculous that he's just like, and he even thinks it's ridiculous as well. It's like, all the things I've been through, I'm about to die from an attack from Jack Russell dogs. But I thought that was quite. They're quite funny. I hope so anyway. That's the idea. It's supposed to be quite a funny. It goes to some very dark places, and Nick's got a very checkered kind of past. But it's quite funny as well. It's supposed to be quite humorous.
So by checkered past, what are some of the things you mean by that? Like,
yeah, so some of it is to do. Some of it is spoiler territory, but it's for the series to come, and his future may be quite checkered as well, because there's something else going on with the overall storyline. He's kind of bounced around a little bit. You know, he has a very something happened to him with his parents. Because one of those things where it's like, I don't want him to have mummy issues or just daddy issues. I want him to have mummy and daddy issues. Right. And so something happened, and he ran away from home when he was a late teenager. And he's never returned there either. And especially now that he knows the kind of truth of the world, he kind of thinks about it sometimes. He's like, what would I find if I went back there? And he's like, I'm never going to go back there. But obviously, he is going to go back there at some point in the series, So he has that kind of thing. And then obviously when he kind of settled down and took his PI job, he's done some things that he's took some cases and worked for some people that he wouldn't want to, he shouldn't, he knows he shouldn't have done. And like even in one of them, the one where the case he was working when he was killed, he didn't, he knows who shot him, but he doesn't divulge that to the police to kind of because he knows it'll cause himself more trouble, and who he was working for as well. And the people who he was working for, they kind of bring him flowers and whiskey and a check for $10,000. And even though he's quite low on cash sometimes, he drank the whiskey, he threw the flowers away, and he kept the check locked in his drawer, and he's never cashed it. And he uses it as a sign of principle, but the check is still there, It's all but so yeah, he's kind of conflicted in some ways,
Yeah, and I mean, growing up, having be estranged from his parents, there has to be some trauma there, but it also sounds like he has a heap of trauma going on anyway from the experience, and then just wow.
Yeah. Wow. And he does. Yeah, he is kind of it's one of those things that I kind of wanted to do and look at this, the kind of tortured PI kind of thing. They all have these trauma and everything. So he has that going on, but he also has this thing where he really wants to connect with people. He really wants friends, and he wants people around him, but he kind of keeps them at arm's length as well. And he knows that he's doing that. He self-sabotages quite a lot.
Why does he do that though? Is it because of the job, or?
Yeah, it's kind of because of the job, and it's because of his thing with his parents as well. And even with his previous job when before he saw the world for it was he was seen as kind of a pariah because it was private. That's it. And so he'd have these kind of relationships with people in the local PD, but they wouldn't like him because of who he was doing jobs for and what he was doing. So he's so he's got one of those things where it's well, don't get too close to people, but really he wants to get too close to people. And he has an on and off again girlfriend called Rosa, who is a much wiser and has a lot more common sense than he does, and she's kind of they're at the point where they've been kind of distant for a little while. She's the person that saved him in the alleyway.
Oh.
So she comes across him in the alleyway and kind of calls the paramedics and does this. So that's this real thing where he's I'm still here because of her, but also I'm not in heaven because of her, right?
Yeah. So that's conflicting. Is she able to see the things he can see?
No, she can't, and he's told her all about it. And it's and she accepts it as the truth and everything, because he's introduced her to people that can confirm it and everything. But she's she's okay with it, as much as you would be. But he used it as an excuse quite a lot, and the whole kind of thing that he can't get his head around, that he's happy to be alive, but also he's living in hell, and he knows that he's living in hell, and what his perception of reality is a lot different to hers. And he says it in his internal dialogue at one point. It's every time I look at her, I'm reminded of the fact that I could be somewhere else now, and it's and it's a bit of a the whole kind of book as well. There's a bit of a thing between them, and he has to kind of come up to some kind of understanding of what it is. And at some point, she even says to him, like, you've not been living your life for the last 5 years. You've just been existing. Like, it's like you're just waiting to die again. Because he knows that he can't kill himself. Like, suicide is a sin, right? And so and that means he wouldn't go to heaven. He'd be stuck in hell. Like, so he's just kind of just going through the motions a little bit.
Man, so she calls him out on it. I bet he did not like that, but
he's all right. He's one of these people that, like, if when someone points out the truth to him, that he's kind of like, all right, okay, fair enough, right? Yeah.
So with them having a rough relationship, like, what draws him? Like, is there something in particular that draws him to her, and he keeps coming back? Or is it like just the guilt? Like, she saved him, so I have to, like, he has to be with her, kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, So there's that kind of thing. It's kind of like English patient kind of thing, they have that kind of like relationship a little bit. But he has got a lot of things going for him as well. Like, he is quite, he is quite kind-hearted. He's quite. He's funny, he's intelligent. He has he has a lot of things that would be like, if he was to live his life and actually just did it, he'd bring a lot of things to it. And that's why Rose has given him a few chances. But we're at the point where we pick up the story where those chances are kind of gone. Possibly, maybe. But like she is as well. Again, she's like, she's a head librarian at the city library. She's can do taekwondo. She's really, really smart. She's about the same age as he is. He's like in his early 40s. She's in her late 30s. So it's like there's even this bit where they have like they meet up in the book, and it's like kind of like a date kind of thing, and she's like, oh, because he calls her out of the blue because he thinks something's going on. And she's like, you're lucky that I don't have a boyfriend at the moment, otherwise this wouldn't be happening. He's like, wait, you've had a boyfriend since? And she's like, well, yeah, I don't just wait around waiting for you to ring me up,
I love it, because so they kind of have a banter-ish relationship then.
Yeah.
Those are the fun ones. They're more realistic when you do that. So, and I feel like it keeps the reader's interest a little more. So yeah. I'm curious, bringing all these different beings and creatures in, how much research did you have to do to like plug them all in minus the werewolves?
Not too much, which is good, which is one of the things, and that's why I was going to set it in Portland at first, but I learned from the first book that I did, which was set in Santa Monica, that was a pain to do it, because it's like, if it was somewhere where I lived, if it was Galway or if it was Manchester where I'd lived for, it would be fine, right? I'd be like, yeah, I know all these streets, I know all this and all this. But when I was doing Santa Monica murders, I was like having to not only research a part of a city and everything, but one that was 80 years ago. So it's like, because someone would be like, this place doesn't exist, or this place, and so it was like, so I learned that. So I was like, I'm just going to make my own city. So I was like, I'll get the vibe of Oregon, and I'll get the vibe of Portland, and I watched Twin Peaks, and I've seen other things that are set in the Pacific Northwest and video games, and I've read some books. So I had that kind of vibe, like, but then with the world, like the way that I set it up, it's kind of like a sandbox. So it's like anything goes, really. And, what I wanted to do was I didn't want to do like, if I took in, so like in the first Twin Lots and Blood, there's Wendigo that pop up every so often as like a problem that Nick has to solve. So what I wanted to do is I kind of wanted to look at like, legends of Wendigo, but then I wanted to do my own spin on it as well. Because that's part of the thing as well. It's like, it's maybe not everything is the way that you expect it to be. Like Nephilim are in there, but my version of Nephilim are a little bit different to what the accepted kind of mythology is. I think like their origins a little different, and so it was fun to do it that way. It's kind of like looking at different. My in One Life Left, Fae are in it quite a lot, but very different types of Fae than what would be usually. And that's one of the part where some of the humour comes from, because like when someone who is like kind of new to the world or can't see it and they're trying to help Nick out and they're like, well, yeah, I've heard of this. And he's like, yeah, well, that's not quite how they are. But then sometimes you can turn that on the head and say, yes, this is exactly how it is, right? Like they might be expecting it to be like something completely different, and it's like, no, that's exactly like how you'd expect it to be. So it's fun to kind of play with, and yeah, it kind of means that nothing's quite off the table except for werewolves.
Yeah.
But you never know. Maybe they will appear at some point, and Nick can be wrong about that as well.
That does leave a curious question. Why did you leave werewolves out?
I just thought it was funny, you know, just be like, just have a hard line at one thing where it was like, just, you don't have anything against werewolves in particular, like, but it was just, I was going to say vampires at first, but I did a short story where, that I mentioned Nick in it, like, there's a poster in an alleyway with Nick on it, and it's about these vampires that open blood banks. And they just keep moving the store. It's like a pop-up shop, and it's open during the night just to kind of access the blood. But someone goes to work for them as like the receptionist, and they're like kind of waiting to be let in. And they look at this poster, and it's like Haven's one and only supernatural investigator, paranormal investigator, Nick Holleran. So like they exist in the world. So I was like, oh yeah, I wrote this story. So if anyone's read it, they'll be like, hang on. So I was like, I'll just do werewolves, because it'll be just there's just one thing. It's like everything exists except for this, right? Just you know, I thought it'd be it made me laugh when I was writing it.
It is, and it's kind of a unique thing, because I feel like that's going to be something that really stands out, and people are going to catch that too.
Yeah, and I might bring them in at one point, and it might just be that they've just been like just keeping to themselves, and just be, you know, just they're all like a commune of like hippies or something, hippie werewolves or something that live in like Fiji or something, you know.
Well, David, go ahead and tell our viewers where they can snag this wonderful series with Nick Holleran in it.
Yeah, so you can get it on Amazon or any kind of bookshop if you want to order the physical copy. Oh, there we go. And my website, which is davidgreenwriter.com. Yeah, so this is the best one to get. It's the Devil Walks in Blood special edition, and there he is coming in and out. That's the best one to get, because there is a couple of different versions of it, like where they're separate, but that's the best one to get. You can get out an ebook, or you can get printed one. No audio book yet, but hopefully once the other ones start launching towards the end of the year, we'll have some audiobooks. And yeah, there's going to be 2 sequels and a prequel out this year as well, so there'll be loads of Nick Holleran to come.
Awesome. Well, thank you for hanging out on Character Driven. And remember, guys, hit that like button, subscribe, check out David's book, and remember, it's always time to go indie now.
Wait. You've got a boyfriend? The steak, rare, almost blue, hovers near my lips, skewered on the end of my fork. Here's me thinking I'm succeeding at a first date, and Rosa drops this bombshell in the middle of the main course. Hard, Rosa clarifies, and I stick the meat in my mouth to hide the grin attempting to bloom on my face. I chew to keep my jaw busy. What? You think just because Nick Holleran isn't in the picture, I'm sitting at home, leaping at my cell every time it vibrates, hoping it's the mysterious paranormal investigator? I thought you knew me better than that, Nick. A trap. I glance at Diana, and she's fixed on me with that stare of hers. 15, but she knows one wrong syllable from me could spell catastrophe. So I bide my time. I catch Rosa's eye, and the grin makes its triumphant appearance. Don't give me that look, Holleran, she says it a little pouter, but her smile's twinkling at me. Still think you're a charmer, huh? I shrug and spread my hands. Hey, I'm just trying to be honest. And the fact is, you were never really one to pine. If I'm acting like a schmuck, why wouldn't you live your life? No matter what happens, I know we'd still be friends, eventually.